Tonight on Ewtn Live, we'll look back at the Second Vatican Council and discuss whether it's a roadblock or a roadmap for the problems facing the church today. So please stay with us. Thank you very much and welcome. I'm Father Mitch and welcome to Ewtn Live, where we bring you guests from all over the world. Now, our guest tonight is a professor of theology at the Augustine Institute in Denver, Colorado, and a very good friend of mine and former boss. He's here to give us some insight into Vatican II and what it really means for the mission of the church. So please welcome my good friend, Professor Douglas Bushman. Good to have you back.
Good to be here.
Good to have you back. We worked together, so folks don't know, we worked together at the University of Dallas way back in the, 94, I think I started, 95, until, 95, it's 95, I think, all the way until 2001, so, and then I came here. So, good to see you again, and how you enjoying Denver?
Denver's great. They've made a great home for us. Tim Gray, the president of the Augustine Institute.
A lot of our viewers know Tim Gray.
I'm sure they do.
And Ted Shree, Dr. Ted Shree.
It's quite a cast.
Yes, it is.
I'm privileged to be among them.
Yep. No, it's a good group of professors and good students.
Excellent students, about 300 worldwide. You know, this is, it's very exciting to watch all the dynamic things happening there. I want to invite all of your audience to come to the AugustineInstitute.org or formed.org if you're interested in a really faithful and dynamic master's program in theology. You don't have to come to Denver. We have this great distance program, and it's just like being in the classroom.
Yep. No, it's good. I spoke once at graduation, and I was very impressed with the students. Why are we talking about Vatican II today?
Well, it's the 50th anniversary. It will be on the 7th and 8th of December, so just a few days away. Yeah. The 50th anniversary of the close of the Second Vatican Council.
Exactly. And this is something that is certainly part of our formation. You and I were alive when the council started. I was, matter of fact, in high school during the council. You were a few years younger, but you know, you were still alive when that was going on. And I'll bet you can answer better today than you could back at the beginning of the council. What is an ecumenical council?
That's the right place to start. An ecumenical council is a gathering of the world's bishops, the successors of the apostles, called together by the Holy Father, the Bishop of Rome, successor of St. Peter, in order to teach on matters of faith, doctrine, and morals, and also to make decisions about the internal life of the church. These are pastoral organizational issues. Most of the councils prior to Vatican II focused on particular aspects of doctrine that had been questioned. Many of the councils came after a heresy had really threatened the unity of the church. Vatican II, one theologian said, Pope John the 23rd had the foresight to apply the remedy before a full-blown fever had hit the church.
Right.
And so at a time when there wasn't any explicit heresy that the church had to deal with.
Yeah, there had been a variety of theological positions sort of milling around prior to the council. The problems that we saw after the council were not caused by the council. There were things going on earlier as well that some of those developed into problems after the council. But it was meant to be a problem. Plus, if you don't mind, I just want to make a little comment to remind folks of the situation, which was just 15 years, not even 15 years, after the end of World War II. All of those bishops had been involved in the war years, many as priests, some as students like Karol Wojtyła, starting seminary during the war. Others have been bishops. Many had been imprisoned by one side or the other. Plus you had the Cold War in very dangerous terms during the council. The Cuban Missile Crisis occurred in '63 before the council was over. The threat of mutual nuclear annihilation was very real. Plus the violence. We had seen secular governments, the nationalistic governments of World War I, National Socialism in Germany, fascism in Spain and Italy, and also a fascist nationalistic government in Japan, that all went to these wars that caused 70 million deaths, plus making them look like amateurs. The communists, atheistic communists, killed tens of millions, so that by the end of the 20th century, between 1914 and 1992, you had 305 million people killed, most of them by their own governments, in the name of theories of evolution, faulty ones, nations being greater than God or the church, and the atheism especially. That was by far the worst. That's the context. And when you think too, in the 2,000-year history of the church, 75 million martyrs have been killed for the faith, Catholics and non-Catholics, but all Christians. And of that 75 million, 40 million died in the lifetime of most of those bishops. And this is an extraordinary period of violence and mercilessness. And this is when Pope John the 23rd calls this council. What do you see as some of the results as we now think 50 years at the end?
Well, Blessed Pope Paul VI succeeded him. John the 23rd, died between the first and second sessions.
Right.
And no pope is obliged to finish what his predecessor had begun. So when Pope John died, the world was waiting for the conclave and the election of his successor. And the big question was, would his successor continue the Second Vatican Council? And the very first thing Paul VI announced was, I intend to continue what my predecessor began.
Right.
Okay. So,
but just so folks know too, that it was Pope St. John the 23rd that made, Pope Paul VI a cardinal.
Correct.
He hadn't been a cardinal under the previous Pope Pius XII. So he was sort of looking to him too, I think.
Oh, these are men.
Yeah.
They friends in a supernatural communion in the faith. And the popes are profoundly aware of that. And it's important to point out, you asked about what is an ecumenical council. It's not just a gathering of men. The Holy Spirit is working at an ecumenical council. Catholics believe that the Holy Spirit in a special way is active and guiding the deliberations and then the outcome, the teachings and decisions that take place at an ecumenical council. Mm-hmm. Some people call the first council the Council of Jerusalem in Acts chapter 15.
Right.
And there's a line in there where the apostles preface what they're about to say. It has seemed good to us and to the Holy Spirit.
Right.
Okay. So what you say is absolutely right. This was Pope St. John the 23rd was aware that there was a turning point in history, a crisis of humanity. Mm-hmm. And what did the church have to say about this? Now, if you won't mind if I go back to your beloved scriptures.
I love my Bible.
Yeah, I know you do, and your good friend Isaiah the prophet. Mm. I think there's a profound parallel between the exile, the temptations and the crisis of faith that Israel experienced, roughly between 587, I was going to say 590, 587, and 539. Okay, thank you for the details. Yeah. Now, here's...
That's why he hired me to teach.
Oh, yes, indeed. But not bad for a dogmatic theologian, huh? That's close.
Yeah,
all right.
Well.
So when the people are exported from the promised land, exiled, they're no longer able to engage in temple worship. The promised land is basically God's dowry to his people. And the fact that they live there is the great sign that God is God. He had brought them out of slavery in Egypt, and he had bestowed this land upon them as their unearned inheritance. Now it's gone. So the question that Isaiah had to face was, is faith in Yahweh, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, is it still relevant? That was the issue. And Isaiah, especially in the book of consolation, the so-called second Isaiah, comes to God's people and strengthens their faith. He exhorts them to keep believing. And he believes that on the horizon, God is up to something. And that something is, as you know, calling King Cyrus to set the captives free, a second Exodus, the people would come back. But for a while, it looked like God had, what shall we say, fallen asleep, forgotten his people.
Or even, some of them even accused God of being defeated by the gods of the Babylonians.
This is exactly right.
Yeah.
Psalm 77 says it. What causes my heart so much grief is that the ways of the Most High have changed. Where are the glory days of the parting of the sea, the manna in the desert? Where is our all-powerful God? That was the issue that Isaiah had to face. Let's fast forward now to the description that you gave of the church in the middle of the 20th century. For roughly 250 to 300 years, let's call it the Age of Enlightenment, dramatic changes had taken place in philosophy, in politics, in economics, science and culture. Is Catholic faith still relevant? Is the real question that Vatican II had the audacity to address. And because if you look at so many people around us in our so-called secular scientific culture, people are looking for the meaning of their life in wealth, in managing power, whether it's economic or political or cultural. And if you think about making a difference in history, you think about being a politician, a rich person, a scientist.
Or somebody in the movies.
Or someone in the movies. Pop music as well. I mean, the artists and the entertainers. Aren't they the ones who are setting the agenda? Suddenly, the church that for well over 1,000 years had been the major cultural agent and had shaped society found herself on the sidelines, kind of watching, relegated to irrelevance. The bishops at Vatican II, and this is really the perspicacity, the tremendous pastoral insight of John the 23rd, St. John the 23rd, was the faith is always relevant. And we have to bring together all the bishops of the world to proclaim the truth that man without God isn't fully human. And you just described what history looks like without God.
Yeah. I mean, you go back to the French Revolution. The whole goal was to remove God and to put pure reason. And they immediately began the first pogrom, or not first pogrom, but the first genocide in Europe's history since the barbarian invasions, which was to execute about 200,000 Catholics in the Vendée region. And that's what happened when they went pure reason without faith, without the basis of the Christian culture they had inherited.
That's exactly right. One more parallel between the exile and Isaiah and Vatican II. Not only did Isaiah bolster the faith of those who were tempted to say, it's all an illusion. It might have been relevant for my grandparents and great-grandparents, but in this mess in which we find ourselves, God doesn't seem to be relevant. Right. Not only did Isaiah say, au contraire, no, God is relevant. wait and see the power of the Lord. But he added something that was really new for Israel. God is going to work through you to be light for the nations. Not only will your faith survive, be deepened, be purified, but God has a master plan that is much larger than just you, Israel. Similarly, at Vatican II, the bishops were concerned they were concerned about this. That is to reinforce the faith of the faithful when it looks like, how relevant can God be in a world where everything's quantified and scientific and everything is managed and organized?
And one other element too, again, that they were very much addressing, you see with the theologians who came to the council, they were dealing with not only that materialistic view, but also in the face of the shock. I mean, it's hard for younger folks to understand how shocked the world was by what happened during the Holocaust and what happened under the Empire of Japan, especially in China. It was shocking. And you saw philosophers opting for political solutions and philosophical solutions. Heidegger, who was a Nazi, opted for death is the meaning of man. Focus on death. Jean-Paul Sartre, who was a communist in France, fought for the underground. He went another direction. Life is meaningless. All you've got is freedom to choose, but there's nothing worth choosing. And those two feelings and the philosophies that had gone for these horrendous, political, oppressive, godless systems, and were winning over a lot of people. That's another issue that they were trying to address in the council again and again.
This is exactly right. And to go just a little bit further, where does our hope in a future lie? With our clever political systems, economic systems, with technology, this is what people are they're pretty much betting their happiness on that. That's how they define their future. And they hope that these things are going to cure all diseases and take care of all of our problems. But these things cannot address the real problem, and that's that we are split within ourselves.
You know, I just found out that the government, our government, we look to them for so many solutions. It costs them 2 cents to make each penny. If they can't make a penny for a penny, how can they run anything else? What do you expect out of these people? But I digress.
Well, but I think this is one of the profound points of Pope Francis's call to our consciences to wake up and look at the environment. Taking care of the environment is really not an end in itself. It's all at the surface of the human person. And the fact that we have technologies that are spinning out of control and coming back to haunt us should make us wake up and realize we're not in control. That God is the master of history, and we have to act according to his principles. In other words, there's a moral dimension that trumps every other dimension. That's the dimension that God is concerned about, that his church is concerned about, that Christ came into the world to die for. So back to Isaiah and the exile. Not only did Isaiah bolster the faith of those who were teetering, but beyond all imagination, he said, this is what you're going through has cosmic ramifications. You are to be the light for the world. Similarly, at Vatican II, its chief document on the church begins, Lumen Gentium, light for the nations.
Right.
Not only was Vatican II called so that Catholics could be strengthened in their faith, but it called for a new evangelization. The hope for humanity is God, and God works through his church.
It's very interesting to me how there's much more focus on ecumenical relationships. The document on ecumenism is much more highlighted than the document on mission or the mission of the laity. And we don't see those, evangelistic documents highlighted. That's, again, a response to the mood of that time. But it's not what the Vatican Council said. The Vatican Council told us to go out. They didn't tell us, oh, everybody's okay. No, it's to go out and win people over to that fullness of truth.
And the fact that these documents have been somewhat neglected is no fault of the popes after Vatican II. Blessed Paul VI issued an apostolic exhortation, Evangelii Nuntiandi,
Exactly.
where he was basically looking back 13 years after the council and saying, this is what it was all about. And this is actually where the phrase new evangelization comes from. Everyone thinks it comes from John Paul II, but he credits the term to Blessed Paul VI.
And also that of creating a culture of love.
Correct.
That also goes back to Blessed Paul VI.
Now you see, a culture of love is what Vatican II would call a fully human culture. Love is the meaning of human existence. If you have love, you can even thrive inwardly in a concentration camp. You can face death with a certain hope for eternity. But without love, as St. John Paul II said in his first encyclical, man faces life and finds it meaningless without love. Fascinating, because God is love. And this is precisely what Blessed Paul VI said in his closing address to look back retrospectively at the 4 years of the council, and he asked, what does it all mean? And he said, fundamentally, it is the religious nature of this council that I want to emphasize. And it's precisely to make this point. In an era when secularism is expanding exponentially, and people are looking for a happiness with no reference to God, here's the Catholic Church saying, no, if you want to be fully human, if you want to know what true, lasting, secure happiness is, you need to surrender yourself and your freedom to the living God.
Right. And this is some of the things. Now, one of the things that I know you and I talked about earlier today were these different evolutions that have gone on. What do you mean by this?
Remind me about.
You're talking about the, at the result of the council and the link between the council and the Annunciation.
Yes. Okay, so let's go back to Paul VI's first encyclical. It's called in Latin Ecclesiam Suam. Here's an interesting little tidbit. The English title is Paths of the Church. You know your Latin. Yeah. Wait a minute.
That's not what it says.
Yeah. No. Ecclesiam Suam means his church.
Right.
Okay.
And it's not my church. It's not our little, because this is one of the things that was so goofy after the council. Well, this is the local church, and that has primacy. No, it's Jesus' church.
It's Jesus' church. He's the head. It's his body. It's his bride. Okay. So I've carried that question with me for years and years and years. And finally, I read the general audience of Pope Paul VI when he promulgated this encyclical. And he said it could be called Paths of the Church. So the title actually comes from Paul VI. Isn't it fascinating that translators actually read what the Holy Father said about it when he promulgated it? Okay. So this encyclical, he's looking at, in the middle of the council, he's saying, how should we think about this council? And he says there are three thoughts on his mind. One, he uses the word awareness or consciousness. This is a time for the church to dig more deeply into her doctrine and understand what God has revealed more precisely. So the renewal of Vatican II begins by the church being a good steward of the patrimony of apostolic faith. Okay. Now, when you understand your faith better, for example, maybe every year you go on a retreat and you understand what it means to be a disciple of Father Ignatius better. What happens? Don't you feel from the one to whom more is given, more will be demanded? If you know better, the accountability gets higher, doesn't it? In other words, there's a call to conversion. To understand your faith better, for me, it would be going on a retreat for couples and getting new insights or deeper insights into what it means to be a husband and a father. And when those come, I need to go to confession. Okay? Will you hear my confession, Father?
Not now.
Okay. So this is what happens. Our conscience gets pricked. And Paul VI, Blessed Paul VI knew exactly what he was doing. Anytime the church goes on retreat and understands God's revelation better, automatically there's a kind of self-criticism. I don't measure up as perfectly as I thought a minute ago I did. So doctrinal penetration or awareness bears the fruit of renewal through conversion. He actually uses the word metanoia. But now, conversion weeds out sin and all that is not Christ, so that what remains is Christ in us, so that he can continue his mission as prophet, priest, and king in the world today. So where Paul VI, Blessed Paul VI, wanted to go was a revitalization of mission.
Yep.
Who is really apt to engage in the new evangelization mission? People who've gone through a deep conversion. But who can go through a deep conversion? People who know their doctrine. And let me point out that, and you know this, that after Vatican II, theology went crazy. Yeah. Theologians felt like they had to question the timeless truths of the faith. Mm-hmm. The old formulas just weren't good enough anymore. And what they did, to use an image, they kind of put a question mark behind, if not all of doctrine, an awful lot of the church's teachings. Now, to live up to doctrine, to engage in conversion, it's called a death event, right? Baptism, we are plunged into the death of Christ so that we can rise to new life with him. All of the conversions that come after baptism are basically a deepening of that baptismal spirituality, all right? Now, would you be prepared to die for something that you're not absolutely certain is true, that comes from God?
Right.
You wouldn't.
No.
And so if you have a lack of doctrinal certitude, there's no way you can have conversion. Let me finish.
Okay.
If you don't have conversion, you're not going to have the revitalization of mission. And now the church is not the light to the nations anymore. So the very starting point for the renewal, as Paul VI envisioned it, doctrinal certitude, was undermined by an awful lot of shabby theology after the council.
The shabbiness that's what I was going to say something a second ago, is that, I mean, I can remember this clear as day, how folks were taking the existentialism as a challenge. There was existential philosophy like Jean-Paul Sartre, there was that existential psychology. And if you cannot stand in your insecurity, then you are not authentic. If you're really courageous, you won't hang on to doctrine, but you'll take the risk of it all being false. Why? You know what? How does that make you more courageous? What have existentialists done courageously? Commit suicide, as many of them did, because they had nothing to live for.
When I go to my doctor, I don't expect him to say, you got to own your illness. Right?
Exactly.
No, and if that's what he says, I'm going to another doctor, right? So I want a doctor who knows his craft and can heal me. Truth sets free. We all know that St. John Paul II began his pontificate with the famous words, "Be not afraid." Some years later, he reflected openly about this, and he said, I'm not sure I understood the full depth of what that means. Today, I want to say, don't be afraid of your own freedom. Our contemporaries, our young people, are afraid of their own freedom,
Yep.
And here's why. They don't receive an education for freedom. It's all the things that we mentioned earlier. It's all science, economics, politics. It's manipulation of things. It's not a really fully human education. The classic liberal arts education, my children, to this day, they think it's normal to sit down at a table and ask questions like, well, what is love anyway? Or justice, okay? And what does it mean to be free and have a conscience? And the great human questions, our origins, where are we headed? Is suffering nonsensical, or can we make sense out of it? Okay?
Whereas today, the big questions are, how them bears?
That's exactly right.
That's why, sports are better attended than church, but they're better attended than school. and a lot of other things.
We don't even want to talk about the websites that get the greatest number of
Yes,
hits.
that'll be another thing. But look, we got to take a break. We're going to come back in just a couple of minutes. I want to get some of your questions and your comments, so please stay with us. First of all, I want to invite you to do what these nice people have done, come from South Louisiana and from Florida and other places. Come here and be part of our studio audience, make a pilgrimage. They've had a nice time over in Huntsville. And if you want to come up here, contact our pilgrimage department at 205-271-2966 or go to the website ewtn.com. They give information about when programs are being done, schedule of masses, information on how to get up to Huntsville and places to stay when you're here. And by the way, I promised yesterday on Threshold of Hope that I would check over at Hamburger Heaven, which is one of our religiously themed restaurants. You know, the poor hamburgers get to go to heaven. And they do have festive holiday milkshakes. So you can go get one of those if you want. Eggnog. But no brandy in it. They're good Baptist people. We don't put up with that. Also want to mention that for this year of mercy, there'll be a pilgrimage to Poland and Prague with Father Miguel Marie, the MFVA. And that will be April 21st to May 1st, 2016. If you want information, go to visitationpilgrimages.com or call 256-347-1475. You ready for some questions?
Ready.
Giddy up. Start off with Veronica. Hello, Veronica.
Hello, Father.
Hi, where are you calling from?
Bandera, Texas.
Bandera. Well, I was just over in Fredericksburg last week.
Wonderful.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Stopped off in Kerrville for a wedding, too. It's beautiful down there. So what is your question?
Well, my husband and I have associated a loss of reverence, respect for the traditions and the heritage of the church since Vatican II. And since we associate that as part of the fruit of Vatican II, a loss of reverence, how would you address that?
All right, so, you know, a lost reverence at Mass and the other traditional Catholic things that we did. What would you say to that? Did Vatican Council tell us to lose that reverence?
That's a great way to formulate the question. And of course, the answer is in the way you formulate it. Absolutely not. Here we have to distinguish between what Vatican II really taught and encouraged versus what happened, okay? And so as one person said, every morning the crow or the rooster gets up and takes credit for the sun coming up, right? Mm-hmm. As if his roosting caused it.
Right.
All right. No, Vatican II did not cause that. People who either didn't read the council, misinterpreted it, or simply disregarded it, or took it as a kind of blank check to innovate, they gave Vatican II a really bad name. You know, I'm teaching now a generation of Catholics that they have, you know, Vatican II is far removed for them. But I'm very impressed by the fact that my younger students, they're not really turned off by it, but generally speaking, they have a kind of negative disposition towards Vatican II. Didn't Vatican II cause a lot of mischief in the life of the church? Let me ask you this. Did Jesus Christ cause a lot of mischief in the life of Israel?
He didn't start it.
Now, see, we have to distinguish between being a cause and being an occasion, all right? Jesus said, on account of me, a family will be divided 2 against 3 and 3 against 2, okay? Question, does that mean Jesus is the cause of division? No. He's God. He's truth, love, life, beauty, and all of these things unite. What he was saying is, depending on how people respond to him, a family will be divided 2 against 3 and 3 against 2. Similarly, Vatican II is in perfect continuity with the apostolic tradition. It wanted to foster devotions, not do away with them. But I agree with the caller. It seems like almost immediately after the council, the devotions practically disappeared. And here's an interesting thing. That meant that Catholics would come to Mass on Sunday and ask of the Mass to meet all of their spiritual needs. The Mass is the source and summit of the Church's life, but not the sum total of the Church's life. It doesn't eclipse devotions, it gives rise to them. They flow from devotions, flow from the Eucharist, and lead back to the Eucharist. So what happened was the Mass became practically the only spiritual experience, toehold, connection with the Church that people had, and everything was being asked of the Mass. It wasn't being lived out through in many ways, in particular devotions in the parish and in the family.
Another element, too, that I think speaks to the kind of experience Veronica and many of us had. The Vatican Council says in the document on the liturgy, which goes Sacrosanctum Concilium, first document of the council. And in paragraph 22, maybe 21, but I think it's 22, it says no one, not even the priest, may change anything in the liturgy. But priests didn't take that seriously, and they changed whatever they felt like. This was so that you had people talking about beer and pretzel for masses instead of wine and bread. And all kinds of, I remember seeing a preface, I didn't hear about it, I read it, that said, we should, thank God for milk and Oreo cookies. I mean, we're thanking God by brand name. You know, this is ridiculous. The Vatican Council said that in the Roman Rite, we should keep the commons in Latin. It was, or Greek for the Kyrie. And they expected us to sing the Kyrie, the Gloria, the Credo, and the Sanctus and Agnus Dei in Latin. That's in there. You ask most young people, they have no idea. They thought that the Mass was no longer a sacrifice. A seminarian once said that to me. Oh, that idea of sacrifice is gone. And I said, well, take a look at the Vatican document. He was shocked. That's how unread it is. And what I urge ladies like Veronica and anybody else to do is read what the document said. I have a question from our studio audience. Ma'am, where are you from?
Pensacola, Florida.
Good to have you here. And what is your question?
Well, I have grown children, and how do we combat all these isms that they are exposed to? I mean, I know we're supposed to pray for them and the salvation of their souls, but as parents, what do we do?
Okay. Some of the kids are not practicing the faith?
Correct.
Yep. Yeah, that's common enough situation.
I'll say two things.
And by the way, so the audience knows, you say this as the father of 6.
A father of 6. Our baby is 19. And so I used to say, people would say, Professor Bushman, give us some advice about parenting. And I'd say, I can't do that. I don't have any finished products yet. Well, now I can say all 6 of my children are practicing their faith, 28 to 19, okay? Now, so I think there are two things. The first is look for every opportunity possible. The normal way that God intervenes in people's lives is through other people. So the prayer petition, send a priest, send a sister, send a holy layperson, send a saint who's written a book, give books, look for every opportunity to go on a retreat and expose your adult children to saving truth. All right? God is more likely, in my experience, to work through someone they haven't met yet, someone who's not all that close to them. In college, it's likely to be a professor, could be a roommate, dorm mate, or something like that. But that's the normal way that God works. He works through other people, and that's why the new evangelization is so important. God has someone getting ready to say exactly the right words at exactly the right time for your adult children. You need to believe that, and you need to intercede that your children be open when those moments of grace come.
That's a good thing to remind people, to pray for the people and fast for them, for the people that will speak to your children, but also be on the lookout for those moments when, if you come at them full blast, they'll run. But if you sit back and wait and watch what's going on, and then at certain points, bam, get them. That's how you sort of get trout. You got to see where they're swimming, and then cast that fly right there, and bam, you get it.
So what you're saying is the father of the prodigal son was a fly fisher.
At least.
See, this really tests our faith, doesn't it? Because it looks like month after month and year after year goes by and nothing changes. And thank the Lord that the young man ran out of money.
Yep.
Okay? Because he had the good sense to come back home. And so another privileged moment of grace is suffering.
Yep.
And if you've gotten sucked into a secular culture, and if the meaning of your life and the hope for the future is based on prosperity and health and all these things, it's just a question of time before these things betray those who put their hopes in them. The church and her members and we parents have got to be in hospitals and hospices. We've got to be in war zones and famine areas. The church is always irresistibly drawn to wherever there's human suffering, because it's at that moment that grace can tend to work so powerfully and open people up to a meaning that transcends this world.
Yep. Yeah, that's a very important thing. C.S. Lewis has a great line: God whispers in our prayer, but he shouts through our suffering. Exactly. Let's go over to David. Hello, David.
Yes, Father.
Hi, where are you from?
I'm from Wisconsin.
Great. And what's your question?
My question is that you guys don't seem to be really telling us anything about Vatican II the way I saw it. I was back there too. I was in grade school, high school and grade school. I saw a lot of changes, and I think maybe your questionnaire before was asking too why the Latin was removed, why did the convents close up, why are our Catholic schools closed. Before Vatican II, our Catholic churches were full. I remember going to Madison on Good Friday afternoon. That place was packed to the hill, and now you hardly see anybody in church. So I don't think that Vatican II has done anything, and I don't know what you mean by some of the big words you were using earlier, trying to explain how the world was going then. Maybe I'm stupid, or maybe us people in small towns don't know anything, but there were more people going to Mass and going to church before Vatican II.
And there were more religious. There were many more religious nuns, and the priests were though now there is a swing up. The number of the vocations to the priesthood are on the way up. So David is pretty disappointed. By the way, don't put down people from small towns. Irondale, Alabama is a small town. So let's see, what is this very intelligent man got going here?
Well, first of all, the observations are irrefutable if you just look at the numbers, okay? The question is, I would add my childhood memory of going to Mass on Sundays, and after Holy Communion, just to take one small sign, only half of those who started out at Mass were still there. They just went right out at communion time, many not having received Holy Communion.
That's right.
Okay. Now,
and they did that because you were required under pain of mortal sin to be there at least for the offertory consecration and the priest's communion. That was the bare minimum, and people did that.
And well, there's another factor also, and that was the very long Eucharistic fast. I mean, they didn't call it this, but when I was a boy, there was a real fainting ministry. People were dropping left and right because they had gone from midnight until Mass without on a fast. Okay, but nevertheless,
and again, to remind people, you couldn't even have a sip of water.
I don't remember that. Okay.
Yeah, you had to be careful brushing your teeth lest you swallowed any water.
Well, so
you kids.
So if the church, and you and I have talked about this on numerous occasions, if the church was so healthy prior to Vatican II, and I'm not contesting the numerical measurements, if the church was so healthy, how do you explain all of the decline that was mentioned here?
Exactly.
And there's many other signs. And so I think it's very important for us to distinguish, as I said, Vatican II as cause or Vatican II as an occasion. And once there was confusion, once people were basically led to question their faith, their church, and even God himself, who is going to make a sacrifice and become a priest under circumstances like that? Who's going to embrace poverty, chastity, and obedience under circumstances like that? And to take my vocation, the married life, who is going to repudiate certain methods to control reproduction when science is king, when it offers such an obvious answer to our problems? But of course, now we have enough experience to realize it's not an answer. It involves another form of slavery. Right. And so I would just go back and say, it would take a lot of time to dig beneath the numbers and to try to look at what the precursors to a genuine crisis in the life of the church were. Mm-hmm. And Vatican II came at a time, there's a famous book called What Went Wrong with Vatican II, written by Ralph McInerney. Mm-hmm. And his view is, it's not that there was anything wrong with Vatican II, but 3 years after came Humanae Vitae, and there was a large-scale dissent on the part of many clergy and religious.
And laity. And a lot of the lay leaders were
absolutely pushing them. Absolutely. And that really undermined that all or nothing principle when it comes to authority and faith.
If you just want to add a couple of the things that happened at the same time, when the year Humanae Vitae came out was 1968. The sexual revolution and drug revolution were in full swing. The last thing the culture wanted to hear is restraint about sexuality. You had already, for 20 years, the writings of people like Alfred Kinsey talking about how you have to get rid of all sexual limitations, and that this was breaking down on a wide scale, not only from Kinsey, but through the media. And cultural leaders were saying, why do you need marriage? It wasn't just religious life. Marriage broke down, so that there was not only increased divorce after 65 when you had the no-fault divorce, but then you see today, 50%, nearly 50% of children are born to people who don't even try to get married. So that you've got there's a change in the culture, as well as the Vatican Council. And I'd add one last thing. The way the council was perceived in this country came primarily through a priest who called himself Xavier Rinn, in a series of articles he wrote every week, and then a book when he compiled them together. And that this saw the council as a fight between liberals and conservatives, and what was going on after the council by many folks who call themselves progressives and such. We have to finish off and take the church farther into progress, as they defined it, not go by what it said. That was part of the agenda. In contrast to Poland, where the main source for understanding Vatican II came from St. John Paul, when Cardinal Karol Wojtyła wrote his book on sources of renewal. Totally different view. And that's what people read in Poland. And you saw, to this day, they're still exporting priests and nuns because the family and religious life was so strong. So it depends on how it was received, and that made a big difference.
Father, let me just add, all of my instincts are to ask this question. How many hours per week were your average Catholics spending studying their catechism, praying, engaging in devotional practices, etc., versus watching television, going to sports events and other cultural events? Look, it's almost a quantifiable battle that we have here. I used to say to my students, I coached football years ago, and I loved coaching football. I'd love to get back into coaching, all right? And if a group of parents came up and said, Professor Bushman, we understand you used to coach football. Would you coach our 7th and 8th grade boys? Sure. Great, you can have them for 1 hour every Wednesday night. Well, if those are the terms, we're not even going to get started. I can't make your boys safe to play football if you give them 1 hour a week to me. No one can make their children safe in an anti-Christian culture, an anti-human culture, if all you get is 45 to 60 minutes of catechism a week. And that's the sum total of your knowledge. You're getting inundated with scientific, economic, political theories, terms, and everything else.
Entertainment.
You start thinking like the culture.
Yep. I have a question from our studio audience. Sir, where are you from?
Athens, Alabama, Father.
And your question?
I guess grew up, or I was a young adult after Vatican II. And, what I see, I was confused. I abandoned the church and finally got my way back. And what I see is like my younger siblings, they're not active in the church. Their offspring are, of course, lost for the moment and or for this period of time. And I see this, and I'm saddened by it. And what do you, just kind of what your comments are on that? What is going to be what we need to do to kind of change that around?
Well, the church uses an expression, evangelizing culture. And so the first culture that children experience is the culture of the family. And what they need religious art on the walls. They need to see their parents praying, turning to God in times of difficulty. They need to see that their faith is relevant. Here's a quick story. My mother died suddenly. And my children were very young at the time. My wife took our twin boys. They were very young, and they wouldn't understand anything, so she went for a walk. There I was alone with our oldest children, and they were like, I'm going to say 8, 6, and 4. They had never encountered death before, and they were looking to me. This was going to probably prime them for the whole rest of their life. How does Dad respond to the death of his mother? God was merciful, and I found a way to cry a little bit. I was ready for it. I think that's an appropriate response. But the key moment was we went through the creed. Now, thank God my children knew the creed. I didn't have to teach it to them. They knew it. And we slowed down when we got to the resurrection of the body. And I said, you see, children, what you believe, what we believe about the resurrection of the body means that Grandma's death is not final. It's not definitive. There is life beyond death. It's called the resurrection. Prior to that moment, this was just data that they had memorized and said when they went to Mass. At that moment, it became explanatory for life's experience. This is what we need. We need a generation of those who understand the connection between our doctrine and life experience. They need to first live it, be witnesses to it, and then they need to verbally explain it. For example, when children have guilt in their conscience, what do you do with that? Well, the culture explains it away. Yeah. Jesus died for that, and we have an answer. It's called the sacrament of confession. Right. Faith becomes relevant in situations like that.
Exactly. And this is something that, as a matter of fact, I had a call today on the radio show that a guy said, my daughter already knows the catechism, and she has to, but the priest requires her to go to catechism classes. What should she do that? I said, make her a tutor of the other kids, and she will learn more by trying to train them. And kids can do that. Yeah. So there's a lot of things that we need to do to have them come to know Jesus. It's not what we do, ultimately, it's going to be the grace of what he does. Just want to mention that the Augustine Institute can be reached at augustineinstitute.org, or you can call them at 303-937-4420. Great courses over there, and it's a good place to learn about the faith. You can teach it to others. Douglas, thank you very much for being with us. And I want to give you all a blessing. Almighty God bless you and keep you, cause his face to shine upon you, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. You know, we can bring you programs that deal with these very important issues and hard issues sometimes. And all the other programs we bring you only because you make this network possible. Mother Angelica set it up that this is brought to you by you. So please, especially as we get closer to the holiday season, keep us in between the gas bill, electric bill, and cable bill, because we'll have a whole lot of bills too. Thank you.